Hey, welcome to another edition of the Chiefs Outsiders podcast, where we are going to preview the upcoming game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Diego Chargers, who are one division championship away from having the rights to be called the Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, the San Diego Chargers, who are once again in first place in the preseason, but not in the regular season. Mm-hmm. So, what are you looking to see this week? What do you expect to happen?
I don't know. For some reason, despite the fact that every time really that Mahomes and Herbert have faced off, that it's been a pretty competitive game, I feel like Kansas City's going to run away with this one.
So there's no question which team has been playing better football this season. And we'll get into it one unit at a time, but the Chargers have some big names and some superstar players. But what I think most people would agree on right now is that they're a poorly coached football team that is always injured. And really, it's hard to make the case they've been anything but average this year.
Yeah.
But it is a scary game because anytime you play a division rival with a high-quality quarterback, you're expecting a competitive game.
Yeah, and this is a big game for Kansas City. Obviously, you want to win every divisional matchup, but really, if they win this game and move to 8-2 and the Chargers are at 5-5, that pretty much ends the division race in the middle of November, which is always good. And also what it does is it really muddies up any route to the playoffs the Chargers may have.
Yeah,
we would like to see.
It's crazy. If the playoffs started today, the Bengals and the Chargers would both miss the playoffs, with the Jets and the Patriots taking their spots. Which actually, yeah, those would be the East. The AFC East would get 4 teams in the playoffs if it started today.
Yep.
Nobody saw that one coming.
Right. If we can get Mac Jones and Zach Wilson in the playoffs instead of Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, I feel pretty good about that.
Right. So, opportunity is what this game is, an opportunity. I think we're going to see Kansas City come out and put out their best effort because they know what's on the line. Mm-hmm. When you can lock up your division this early, it's a big deal. So let's talk about sides of the ball. Let's talk first about when Kansas City has the ball. So the Kansas City offense has been the best offense in football this year. I think that's pretty clear cut, to be honest. And for the first time, really, we're going to be missing some key pieces. Mm-hmm. We're assuming. Because I hope Juju doesn't come back and play.
Right.
I think we can win just fine without him. It's a brain injury from he takes a lot of balls across the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. And the likelihood of another hit occurring is too high for me to risk it. I think that whenever the player clears the protocol, most of the time you should give them one more week.
Right.
But we'll see what they actually do. But let's just assume that Juju's out. And where does that leave us as a receiving corps?
So McCole Hardman went on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 games. That happened just a few hours ago. And then talking about this matchup, you also have to mention how injured the Chargers are, which that's part of their identity at this point. It's literally my entire lifetime, as far as I can remember, this part of the season, you cannot count on a Chargers team to be healthy. So Joey Bosa is still on IR. That's their longtime leader and best pass rusher. Khalil Mack is still having a good season, but J.C. Jackson, who had not been playing super well, but is the big-name, high-dollar free agent that they brought in, and he is also out. So there's some key injuries on both sides, but I think this is really an opportunity for Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney to kind of put their print on this game.
Yeah, the Chargers have a lot of pieces missing on defense, but let's look at how that receiving core is going to shake out. So if Juju's out and Hardman's out, like you just said, that means Toney and Sky Moore should get bigger roles. And I was thinking about a couple things that Andy Reid has said in press conferences lately. He usually doesn't give you a lot of real information in these. he makes his little jokes and his canned responses. But he was asked about Juju and talked about how important it was to have that receiver opposite Kelsey that runs kind of those similar routes that are like possession receiver routes. And he didn't talk about Tyreek Hill there. He said we've had good guys do that like Sammy Watkins, and we've had Pringle, and now Juju's kind of filling that role. And then after Juju got hurt, Andy mentioned that Sky Moore was also a good option for those types of routes. And so I think we'll probably see a lot of Sky Moore taking Juju snaps and Tony taking kind of the Hardman role.
Yeah, as a guy who had just really high hopes for Sky, I hope that this is a game, because really we haven't even seen him get more than 2 targets in any game this year, let alone receptions. He has not had multiple catches. No, he had 2 catches in the Buccaneers game. But I'd like to see him at least get 3 or 4 opportunities to make a play. And I think another key thing that we can take from the press conferences today is that Dave Toub said that Isaiah Pacheco will no longer be returning kicks. And as much as Andy Reid is never, he's never going to publicly dog a guy, but them clearly not giving Clyde any offensive opportunities last week, and then immediately after that, taking Pacheco off of kick return, I think that speaks volumes about his role moving forward.
So then the next question there is, who is returning kicks? And I see Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney as your options there, who are both playing a lot of offense as well.
Yeah, I really don't know. And I guess now that I think about it, maybe Justin Watson. I don't know. I really don't have an answer for who that's going to be. But
if I had to place a bet on it, I would say Toney.
Yeah, I would. That's who I would prefer it to be.
Yeah. So with the Chiefs' offense, I think you're going to see the exact same type of productivity, even if Juju's out. So the Kansas City receiving core is not, ultra high end. It's not top loaded. It is a deep receiving core. Feels like there's 6 guys who you can count on. And even if they bring up Kemp, that's a guy who's been here for years and can step right in and knows the offense.
And Kemp, I think, is a very likely elevation for this because Chris Lamons is also unlikely to play in this game, and Dave Toub loves both of those guys so much on special teams, and he's a guy who knows the offensive system. So
yeah, and Kemp, when he has been called up this year, has flashed on special teams. So feel pretty good about the receiving core. Feels like the running game is taking off. There's a little bit of concern with Andrew Wiley, but I guess he's practiced as a full participant the last 2 days. And another option, a lot of people have been talking about Odell. Should we add Odell? And then say, well, now our receiver room is kind of stacked. Like, who's he taking snaps from? And that's an interesting question. But as a team trying to win a Super Bowl, you always have to be thinking, what if 2 guys get injured? There's a lot of injury-riddled teams around the league. We could have 2 or 3 of our receivers go down.
Yeah.
So depth is always an important thing. But another thing I think Kansas City's got the option to excel at whenever we're thin at receiver is throw some of those 2 and 3 tight end sets out there. Jody Fortson and Noah Gray can be productive weapons in this offense. So I don't think there's going to be a scenario where losing one receiver, whether that's Juju or Tony or Hardman or MVS, is really going to impact this offense the way it would, say, Buffalo.
And we saw even just last week, and this was obviously mid-game, not with a full week of knowing who was going to play, but once those guys did get banged up, Jerick McKinnon had 6 catches last week. So, yeah, like you said, tight ends and backs, and they have multiple ways to supplement that if we are missing 2 receivers.
So I feel really good about the Kansas City offense coming into this game. Now, the Chargers defense is another story, where you just listed off a bunch of their injuries. Khalil Mack is playing at a very high level. He only plays one position.
Yeah.
Same thing with Derwin James. He's playing at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
He plays a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah.
But, they've got a couple of players, but they're super thin at D-line.
The entire D-line, yeah. And even whenever they weren't injured, which they lost 2 guys that were being forced into starter-level roles last week to injury, but even before those guys went down and the guys before them, they lost 4 guys on the D-line, they couldn't stop the run at all. So as much as it's not part of Kansas City's identity week to week, I would hope that they have some level of success running the football.
San Diego right now is a bottom 5, maybe 5 to 10 range, but statistically they're around 5 to 10 worst defenses in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're missing more guys. And I don't see any way they slow Kansas City down other than, like fluky interception type things. But that can happen in any game. But
yeah,
just as far as stopping the Chiefs, I don't think there's any way.
Yeah.
And you need to, whichever side Mac is on. So when you've got Mac and Bosa, you can't slide protection to both of them. But with just Mac, you should be able to work around him.
Yeah.
Same way we did with Nick Bosa against the 49ers.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier to deal with one guy that can wreck an offense versus 2 at the same time.
So then let's look at when the Chargers have the ball. So we'll start by talking Chiefs defense, which I feel like has been getting better and better throughout the season. And this defense, the defense Kansas City wants, all starters, has played 21 snaps together this season, which was up until McDuffie went out in the first game. And since then, we have not seen the complete Chiefs defense, and we should see it this week.
Yeah.
Because we had Willie Gay, and we had Frank Clark, and we had McDuffie. And so we're going to see him at full strength. And we've seen Joshua Williams, who seemed to kind of get demoted from his training camp spot, preseason predicted spot, and has elevated himself back up now to the fact we have, 5 members of the defense of the secondary that are rookies and looking good. I have an overconfidence right now in the Chiefs secondary with the length and athleticism and the way they've been playing against a couple of limited passing attacks. I have a little bit of an overconfidence, like to say, let's see it. Let's see somebody shred this secondary.
Yeah, and the youth in the secondary has played really well all year. And there's a little bit of a trend I'm curious to see going forward, that traditionally in Kansas City, Steve Spagnuolo has not liked moving his corners. For the past several years, it has mostly been Bashaud Breeland playing left corner and Charvarius Ward playing right corner with Snead in the slot. And this year, although it's been limited because of the injuries and because of guys rotating in and out, we've seen them move McDuffie from side to side, and we've seen them move Williams from side to side a little bit. So I'm curious in this game, especially with there's a lot of talk about Keenan Allen and Mike Williams being back for this game, that Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson both have the physical tools, the length necessary to match up better with a guy like Mike Williams. And then Trent McDuffie has more of the short area quickness and the start-stop ability to match up with a guy like Keenan Allen. I'm curious if they do some swapping and moving around there, or if they try and stay more standard.
Yeah, so Mike Williams in the Week 2 matchup between these two teams, he kind of terrorized Rashad Fenton. I think he almost retired him in that game, and he's no longer here.
To be fair, I think the touchdown was on Watson, and he got a couple on Snead too in that game. But which he's just been a chief killer his whole career.
You got to give the other guy his credit for being a good player.
Dating back to Phillip Rivers in 2018, and I think Mike Williams had 3 touchdowns and the game-winning 2-point conversion in that game. So that guy just has our number. But hopefully, like I said, I would like to see them put some length on him versus a smaller player in McDuffie.
Yeah, and it's what Andy Reid says. It's what Patrick Mahomes said when asked about it. He said, I hope those guys play because we're out here to win a Super Bowl, not to sneak by. Like, what if we could win a bunch of games by never playing the team's best?
Right. Yeah.
If you want to win a Super Bowl, you want to beat those teams today and prepare you to play them in the playoffs. But I like to see this matchup. I'd like to see it exactly like you're talking about with Williams on Williams, yeah. I started to think that didn't sound right. But Williams on Williams, I think that he's a matchup for him. Because Williams is not a speed receiver.
No.
And Joshua Williams has the length to match up with him. So I hope we see that matchup all day.
And Spagnuolo has talked about it in the last couple of weeks that they're kind of alternating series, rotating with Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson. And that is true, but I think last week Joshua Williams played about 15 more snaps than Jalen Watson. So it seems like they're leaning his direction. And I think that they're hoping that keeps swinging back and forth and that those guys keep pushing each other heading into the playoffs and that's a healthy competition all year long.
Yeah, and so I'm excited about the secondary. I think most of us are excited about the secondary. And then you've got the fact that the Chiefs' defensive line is generating a lot of pressure, even with a four-man rush sometimes. And I would say for most of the time Spagnuolo has been here, Kansas City has relied on the blitz to get pressure. We have not very often just lined up four defensive linemen and then created a lot of pressure. It feels like we are right now. And Frank Clark played two of his best games as a Chief and then got suspended. And now he'll come back refreshed and ready. Hopefully, we can put that pressure on without blitzing because we've actually got some athleticism at linebacker to bottle up Eckler, which is they're passing to Eckler for 5 yards.
He's averaging over like 12 targets a game, I think. Which that has been happening without their two best receivers, obviously, but Eckler is seeing an absurd amount of passing volume this season.
Yeah. So the ability to generate pressure with four for any team in any game is a big deal. But it seems like when they get us, a lot of times Eckler has that big day in the passing game. And I think we've got the athleticism at linebacker to slow that down. But Chris Jones is having a career year as a guy who had, a sack in 14 straight games or whatever the crazy number he had was. He's having a career year. Colin Saunders is playing as well as we've seen from a guy lined up next to him. The pass rush has been pretty good from the ends.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, is this Chargers offensive line is not as good as it was earlier in the season. They obviously lost Rashawn Slater, who was an all-pro caliber player just early in his second season. He's out for the season. And then I think they're banged up at several other positions. I don't know the specifics, but and I think across the board, really, this Chiefs defensive line is having excellent seasons. Like you said, Chris Jones is going to be first-team All-Pro this year. Colin Saunders is really coming into his own. George Karlaftis is getting more and more comfortable, more and more reps under his belt. Again, Frank Clark played some of his very best football right before the suspension. And then Mike Dana is a guy who, and in almost all the key stats, pressures, pressure rate, the pass rush win rate, all of that stuff, he is having his best season. And then Dunlap rounds that group out as the steady veteran presence.
So the defensive line is playing better than I expected them to play at any point during this season. That's what I'll say. And I would say that about the entire defense. To this point in the season, I would say Kansas City has had about a league average defense.
Yeah.
Not exceptional, but they're not bad either. And Spagnuolo defenses have a tendency to get better throughout the season. We've seen that enough times that you can almost expect it. And when you've got 7 rookies playing, you would really expect that this year. So I feel a lot of confidence going into this game. Now, at the same time, you got to give credit to the other guy. Justin Herbert is a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
he's got his arm strength is unquestionable. When he can put a ball anywhere he wants to put it, and it hasn't led to a lot of the results you would expect for that kind of an arm talent.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of fourth quarter interceptions, but if he's on, he can hurt you.
Yeah. And that's absolutely the case. Watching that 49ers game last week, there were probably at least 4 throws, just thinking back off the top of my head, that were genuinely some wow moments. Of the one that stands out was stepping up into the pocket to the left and then almost with both feet off the ground throwing to a guy a crossing route to the other side of the field, and it hit him in stride. And it was, he's got that upper echelon of all-time NFL arm talent. But it is exactly what you said. I'm pretty sure since he came into the league, he leads the entire NFL in fourth quarter interceptions. That one last week against the 49ers was especially horrendous. I don't know if there was ever an explanation on it, but there wasn't a receiver within 15 yards of the ball. So,
yeah, that's hard to explain that one away.
Right.
One guy went the wrong way. We'll explain it that way.
Yeah.
I expected going into this season that it would be a dogfight between the Chiefs and the Chargers, and for any hope of that to happen, the Chargers have to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel more confident going into this game than you would expect.
Yeah.
The Chargers are not even playing as well as their record, and I think we are.
They've absolutely squeaked out some wins against bad teams. I mean, that Atlanta game, they had Austin Eckler fumbled the game away. The defensive lineman had returned the ball 20 yards. All he had to do was fall down, and they pick up a first down, and they win that game. Instead, he somehow just dropped the ball, and they got back on it and won it. But yeah, it's a divisional game. You always expect another level of competition from those games. It's a team we've beaten before, and as much as we talk about Kansas City knowing what's on the line for this game, the Chargers do too, and I'm sure they fully understand that all of their hopes they had coming into the season die if they lose this game.
They're going to come out firing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'll come down to Kansas City is a better football team.
Yeah.
And there are 2 types of games in my mind. There are games that are pretty evenly matched, and it could go either way. And then there are games where you have a superior team, and the way Kansas City loses that game is a fumble by Pacheco inside the 10, or 2 missed kicks, or a muffed punt, or those types of things. But I think if we are even in turnovers, I think this is a win. And Kansas City has actually struggled in turnovers. Mm-hmm. It's very rare that the number 1 seed in the conference has a negative turnover rate for the season, but that's what it is right now.
It's unbelievable, really. There is no greater predictor of success in the NFL throughout its entire history than turnover margin, and the Chiefs are winning going away most weeks while losing the turnover battle consistently.
It doesn't get much better than this for a Chiefs fan to go into a middle of the season game with the chance to lock up the division. And right now, holding the number 1 seed, it's all opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, I think that about wraps it up. I appreciate you guys taking time to watch the video, and we'll see you on the next one.